Okay, so now we're finally ready to put these two videos together, two programs together so that they operate in conjunction. The first thing we have to realize about what we're trying to do here is that there are going to be two different modes of operation, and clicking the buttons is going to be different um, in the two different modes. So, what we need to do, of course, is your combined sound players file. Is we're first going to have to make another variable. And this other variable will be a state variable, a variable that tells you which mode of operation you're in. So we're going to create a variable, and we're going to just call it mode. And the mode, we're going to initially set it. We're actually going to use text for this. This is a little text box. You can type whatever you want inside of it. And we're going to put it in the play mode. So to start with, of course, it will always be in the play mode. Now, we're going to go into our control and put an if then else, stick it right here, and put all of this under the then. Let's take if I get this. This is interesting. I have an if statement with another if statement inside of it. So this if statement will respond to if we're in the play mode, it'll execute this code. Otherwise, it'll be in the assign mode, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So we want to put in some logic here. As always, you put a comparator in your if statement here. And we want to say that if the variable mode is set to play, then we'll operate as we currently do, where they just work independently of each other. You click one and it cycles through if it's the indexer. Otherwise, it's one of the other buttons and it plays those. Now, obviously, the other mode will be the assign mode. And of course, to make that happen, we're going to need a new button. So we're going to put an additional button over here next to play sound. I'm going to change the text on that button to be assign sound. And what this will do when you click it is it will assign the played sound to that to the button that you hit next. We're also going to come over here where that is, right here, this button. I'm going to rename it assigner, like that. So that button will assign it to be either way. One other thing we're going to do on our indexer, I'm going to rename that real quick. I'm going to call it indexer or cancel. The reason I'm going to do that is because when we're in the assign mode, we might decide we actually hit the assign mode when we don't really want to assign. We need a way to exit out of that. And so this sound button here will change text to say, click here to cancel assignment or something like that. So I'm setting this button up to do both. So this will be the assign button. You hit it, and then it'll go into the new mode. And after we hit that, this will become the cancel button. So let's go back over here to our blocks. And we have an if then here with an else. We actually have another button we've added now. So we've got to handle the other button. If the component is the index or cancel button, then we'll just play the next sound. If it's not, then we're doing this button. Well, we need to handle this third thing. So if you look at the blue dot here on your if then, you can add something called an else if. And we put that between the if and the else. Okay. So this is another check. So it's going to check to see if the button we pushed is the indexer. We're going to have it then also check. Let me copy that, bring it down here. We're going to have it check to see if the button we hit was the assigner button. Wait a minute. Index or cancel. Yeah, there should be an assigner button. Oh, there it is, top on it, alphabetical. The assigner button. So if we're going to assign a sound, that's going to be a different set of steps than playing through the list or doing this. So if we're going to do the assigner, what we need to do first, obviously, is change this variable that's the mode to be a different mode. So we go to variable, set our mode to be and then we'll put some other text in here. Let me duplicate that one, bring it down. Instead of play, we're going to change it to assign. Now, what's going to happen is if we're in the play mode, it'll execute this code. We're going to put our assign code down here. So when you're normally playing it and you hit the assign button, nothing's really going to happen. Well, actually, there are some things that want to happen. All right, let's think about that. One of the things we want to happen if we click the assign button is we're going to want the text for the indexer to change to click to cancel. So let's do that. Let's go to the indexer cancel button, and let's take the text of that. So we first enter that mode, and we want to change that text to be click to cancel. So that when we go into the assign mode, that's going to change to click to cancel. Let's see, what else is it going to do when I click that button? I think once it does that, we might want to do we might come back to this later. We might want to do something so that maybe the borders of these guys change color, or they get grayed lightly, or something happens. So when you click the assign sound, it's going to change this to say click to cancel, so you don't assign necessarily. This button will probably do nothing during the assign sound, and we might make these guys change color, all in preparation for saying the next thing will happen after you click that assign sound is it's going to wait for you to click one of these buttons. So there's going to be another button click that follows it. So all we have to do now is write and put here the code that will occur when we're in the assign mode. So let's think about that, what that'll be. In the assign mode, we're going to, again, need to be able to handle which different buttons get pushed. So we're going to put another if then else in there, like this. And actually, there are 3 buttons, so maybe it'll be if then, else if then. We have 3 different kinds of buttons. We've got the kind of button that is the indexer button. Duplicate that, bring it down. So we'll write the code for what happens if you hit, and of course it'll be in cancel. You'll have that set up to cancel then. So if you click this, it'll just change your mode back to play, and then it'll skip to the end and move on with life, waiting for you to go back to push other buttons. So that'll be fairly simple code in there. Then, of course, we're going to have to decide what we're going to do if the component you click is the assign button. And this is going to be interesting. What we're actually going to do here is we're going to never put any code in here. The idea being that if you click the assign sound button, if you actually double click it, you don't want it to go to assign and then switch to something else. So it's basically when it's in assign mode, this button does nothing. That's really what this is going to say. We're not going to write any code in here. This will just be an empty spot. And then else, well, it's if you're hitting one of the buttons. Now, here's an important thing. If you're hitting one of the buttons, then we want to know which button you hit. Well, this is this thing here. So let's duplicate this. And this will tell me which button I hit. It'll just take the component, find it in the list, and give me the index of that button from here. The reason that's useful is that that's actually going to be the location of the sound we want to pull out of the assigned sounds is going to be at button index. Similarly, the pointer here that we made when we were scrolling through the sounds will be the location of the sound we want to move out of this list. Now, the way we're going to do this, we don't want to lose either sound. So it's sort of like this. You'll notice that if I say this is the sound I want to move out, I pull this out, I have to put it somewhere. While let's say this is the one we wanted to replace, I have to move it over to here like this and pop it in there. And then I have to move this one over to here. That process, I call doing that swap. I swap things by pulling some things out and moving other things over. I don't remember which one I did. Let me see, can I control Z it? Oh, I can only control, there we go. So I'm putting it back the way it was. So I switched pop and honk, I think, just now. So that's the process that we want to code into here. Now, I'm going to show you something new. Um, at first, it seems kind of silly, but long term, it is an improvement. Um, and that is that you can make what are called procedures. So if you create a procedure, and there are two different types here, we're just going to do the first one here. If you create a procedure, you can give it a name. Let's call this name swap. I'm not going to code it yet, but now if I go into my procedures, there's call swap. So I can put that here. So what'll happen is that when you're executing this code, it'll get that button index, knowing which one of the 8 buttons you hit. And then it's going to call swap and do the swapping. This makes it a little easier to read the code and allows me to postpone some of my coding here. So we'll do that if you, not if you click the assigner. I apologize. These don't go under assigner. I just got through telling you that we don't want to do anything if we're doing the assigner button. It's if we push one of the other buttons. I stuck that in the wrong place. I apologize. I just moved it down. Yeah. So if we're clicking the indexer, we'll do one thing. If you click, it will actually cancel. So maybe I'll do that. Let me go to procedures and create a procedure here like this. I'm going to call it cancel. And then now I can go to my procedures here and I can put cancel here. You can do this. In fact, let's make one more. Let's make a procedure that's called do nothing. That's an easy one to write because it literally is done. So what happens here is this whole if block now has a logic to it that's nice and compact and allows us to offload these jobs of swapping the things, canceling the assignment, or doing nothing. And so if the button that gets pushed is the indexer, that is if we're not in the play mode. So up here is if we're in the play mode, we do those things. But if we're not in the play mode, down here we'll execute this block. And this block says if the button that gets pushed during assign mode is the indexer, we'll cancel the assignment process. If the button we push is the assigner, it'll do nothing. It'll call the do nothing command, which will never put any code in here. And then if the button is one of the 8, then it'll remember which one of the 8 it is, and then call the swap command. So that's the logic of that, and that's a nice way of coding, and it means this won't get any bigger either. These guys are a bit bigger, but I don't have to worry about these being too close in here in terms of my organization. So some people call these procedures, some people will call them methods, some people call them tasks. There's a lot of names for them, but a fairly common thing in coding is to set up these things that go out and do something and then come back and continue the code from where you left off. So let's think about what we want. So we figured out do nothing, does nothing. That one's done. We're done writing that one. Let's talk about cancel. Well, I think all we want to happen if you click the cancel button is we're going to want our mode to switch again. So we'll go to set our mode back to play. I'm going to duplicate this one here, bring it down. So if you hit cancel, you want to set your mode back to play. But you got to remember, you also, when you went into assign mode, you changed the text of the indexer button to be click to cancel. So we want to make sure we change that back as well. So let's go here, put this here. So when we click cancel, we're canceling the assignment command. All we're going to do here is change it back to the play mode and pick my indexer, change this back to say click to play. I think that's what it said. What did it say? Let's see what the original text of that was. Oh, play next sound. Let's change this back to say play next sound. So if you cancel it, it just goes back to the way it was. Pretty simple. That one's done. We could test the functionality of this, but since nothing happens here, and we do want to also return to the normal mode after we've done our assignment, then we really should write something in here. So swapping. Now, here's the thing. In order to do the swap, we're going to need to know two things, and we're going to need to add a third thing. The two things we're going to need to know is we're going to need to know which the button index is. So in swap, you can have it take what's called an input. So whenever you call a procedure, you can have it take inputs. Now, by default, it calls this input X. We're going to call it index of button. The reason we're not calling it button index is a global variable, and it'll cause some confusion as we pass it into this. So we're kind of changing its name. The other thing we're going to need to do the swap is we're going to need to know, we're going to need coming from this part of the program into this part of the program, so an input, we're going to need an input of the index of sound. So this is not the, maybe I should change it, index of unassigned sound. Let me say that instead. Index of unassigned sound. So we're going to need to know which sound was last playing up here, and we're going to need to know which button you just pushed to assign to it. So those two bits of information you're going to need to know. Basically, we're going to need to know where the sound is in here. That's the index of the unassigned sound, which will just be what pointer was. And the other is the index of the assigned sound, right? Which, that's what I call it. I call that yet. Oh, the index of button. It's the same as the index of the assigned sound. In fact, yeah, let's call, well, we'll leave it the same. It's fine. No, I'm going to change it. Index of unassigned sound. Of assigned sound. So that's the same as the button index, but this will save us the hassle when we're writing down here to try to remember it has anything to do with the button. It's just the two sounds we're swapping. It happens to be the same index of the button you hit. That'll tell you where in this list you find the button you hit, and that corresponds to where in this list the sound you want to move out. So those are the two sounds we're going to want to swap. Now, up here in the swap call, that's what they named this. They call this a call. It says call there, which means go down here and do this and then come back. In the call, it's going to want to know what is the index of the assigned sound. And the index of the assigned sound will merely be the value of the global pointer. So I'm going to duplicate this. So this pointer is pointing to the unassigned sound, the sound we need to move coming from the unassigned sound list. And the index of the assigned sound will be the button index, which button we hit. So we go to, again, let me just duplicate this one real quick. Move that to here, and that'll be your button index. So there's a sound in the sounds list at the location of the button you just hit that you want to swap with a sound in the unassigned sounds list that's at the pointer that was scrolling through before. And so that's one of the reasons we made this variable global pointer up here, so that we could access which sound we last played will be at pointer. Okay, so we're going to pass those two things down, and they'll have these names in this part of the code, whereas they had these names when we came from the code that calls it. We got that. The third thing we're going to need is we're going to need a place to put each of these sounds when we do the swap. Okay, so we're going to make one more variable, right? Remember, like up here when I was physically moving them, I had to move one to a place to hold it while I moved the other one into its spot, and then I moved it from the holding place over. I'm going to, in fact, let's just call the variable that. So let's make a new variable, and we'll call it holding place. Okay. Now, it's going to be one of these sounds. So you want this variable to be expecting a sound. So we're just put some random sound in there. I'm going to just take the first one from here and duplicate it. We just need a placeholder when we create the variable. So this sound here is kind of a placeholder sound that we're going to put in the holding place. That's going to be overwritten as soon as we execute swap. So to swap, it's fairly straightforward. We're going to first take the holding place, and we're going to set it to one of these two sounds that came down. Now, notice it's not the actual sound. These are the indexes. So we're going to have to go into the list and select a list item. So let's do this. Let's do what we did before. Let's pull the sound out of the unassigned sounds. Let's remove this one first. So to do that, the list we're going to be pulling from will be the unassigned sound list. And the index we're going to do will be the index of the unassigned sound. So basically, it's going to take the value that was the pointer. It's going to pass it down here as index of unassigned sound. And it's going to use that pointer to look in the unassigned sounds and write into holding place the value of whichever one we're pointing at. It's going to take this and copy it to that location. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to set the sound that we just moved away. We want to move the sound from this list into that spot. So we're going to change the variable in unassigned sounds at the location we were at to be equal to the value in assigned sounds at this button index. Basically, we're going to pull one of these from over here and overwrite the value into there. So let's write that code now. Okay, so let's duplicate this briefly. Pull it down here. Oh, wait, no, that's not going to work for us. Sorry, I'm wrong about that. We're going to have to do a different thing because it's from one list to another. So we're going to replace one list item with a different one. So we're going to pull this out of here. It's in lists. We're going to replace one item from one list at one index with an item from the other list. So we'll do that. So the first list is we're going to replace the item in the unassigned sounds. That's the one we moved over away. So the list will be the same list as this. Duplicate that. It's going to take that one, unassigned sounds list. At the index, well, it'll be the same index. We're going to take that and we're going to replace it with a sound. Let's select this. But the sound we're going to do is going to be from the assigned sounds list at the index of the assigned sound. So that's saying replace one of these at the pointer to one of these at the button index. We're going to pull one of these over here and overwrite the one in there. Now, you might be like, wait a minute, we're going to lose that. Well, we're not, because we already copied that value to the holding place. So now all we have to do is take the one from the holding place and put it in the sounds list. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to duplicate this, put this here. But now we're going to, let me take this out for a minute because that kind of confuses things. We're going to replace in the assigned sounds at the index of the assigned sound at that same location. And the replacement will be the variable we had in the holding place. So basically, it's going to take A and put it at position C. Then it's going to take B and put it where A was, and then replace B with C. I don't know if that made sense. This goes into there. This goes into where that one was. And then this goes into where that one was. That's the logic of this. It's a little harder to see, I guess, in this. I'm not crazy about Scratch in this way. Swap essentially is of the form set this swap space equal to A, set A equal to B, and then set B equal to the swap space. So the 3 gets moved around. This will do the swapping for us. So that code is written. Now, after we finish swapping, we then want to set our mode back to play. So this stuff right here, go back into play mode. And we could have put this in the swap command, but I'm going to leave it out because the swap command I want to keep just swapping. And this bit of code here also need to be reset. So after we've done the job of swapping, we want to return to our normal state of being. There's just one more problem. I want you to think about it for a moment. I swapped the sounds, but I didn't change the text of the button. So I'm going to make one more procedure, and I'm going to move it down here, and I'm going to call it change. Well, actually, you know what? I don't need a whole procedure for that. I take that back. I'm going to delete this. I need a single line. I need it to change the text of the button at the button index to be the associated sound. Wait a minute. We've done that before. We've done that before. If you recall right here, this does exactly that. It sets the text of the selected button, which we'll have to change the index here. It won't be number anymore. It'll be the button index. But we change the text of the button to the same place from the assigned sounds. So I'm going to duplicate this. It's very similar to what we want to do here. Let's pull this over like this. Let's put that here. Move these guys out of the way a little bit. And I know this is a long video. But we want to, the component we want is the button at button index. And we want to change its text to the sound at button index. We're 99% the way there. There's one last thing I just remembered we need to do. If you wanted to try it out right now, it'll mostly work. But what will happen is when you click assign sound and then you click a button, it's going to change this button to show that. But this label up here that shows up, do you remember the label that we have that shows us the name of the sound in the unassigned sound list? It's still going to say the name of the sound we just moved. So we need to change it to be the sound that the other sound we just moved. So back in the blocks, the last thing we have to do, we're going to have to take the label text and want to set it equal to the name of something. It'll be from our assigned sounds. No, not our assigned sounds. It'll be from our unassigned sounds at the position of the pointer. So there we go. There's our code. Let me check it real quick. Let's see what happens if I go to connect, AI Companion. I'll get my old phone out. There's a couple little fine things we'd like to do, like have the buttons change their appearance when we go into a different mode, but we don't have to have that necessarily. I'm going to scan the QR code. Okay. And let's see what I see on my screen. It's going to look essentially like the designer. Let this come up. 30-minute video. We did a lot in this video, though. So let's go to the designer here. So it looks kind of like this, except for this says the name of the first sound in my list, and this is the second sound, those guys there. This says play next sound, this says assign sound. Now, if I click the play next sounds button, I actually get the word lightsaber appearing right here where the label is. Remember, there's a label that's living right where that green line is. It's currently empty, but it's going to come up with lightsaber. Okay. If I click play next sound again, oh, wait, not here on my phone, silly. It made the pop sound. If I pick it again, there's the Price is Right sound. So right now, the Price is Right sound is selected on my phone. If I click this button on my phone, okay, now if I click, let's say this top button up here on my phone, the operation list item cannot accept the arguments 1, 1. Uh-oh. I don't know what I did wrong. Shit. A half-hour video, and I think I wasted my time. So, after just a few minutes of poking around, I did find my error. If you look right here, this is trying to choose the list as the index. I made that mistake there. So I'm going to click this and come down, and this is going to be the assigned sounds list. So the assigned sounds list, I'm going to look at this index. And the unassigned sounds, I'm looking at this index. And the assigned sounds, I'm looking at this index. So I'm double checking. So I have at my list variable, I actually have a list. Now it should work. It's still connected. So let me, I'm going to click to cancel. The reason I'm clicking click to cancel is so that, and that'll be, this button here will not say play next sound. It'll say click to cancel when I'm in assign mode. Now, if I click that button again, it says play next sound, play a sound, click this, play the sound, click. So I'm cycling through the sounds there. If I click this button, I get a beep. If I click this button, click this one, I get the groan. You get the idea. It's doing the two separate things. Now to get them to go together, the whole point of this video, I'm going to, let me see, play next sound. Oh, wait, here. Yeah. So I got a ding ding. All right. I'm going to assign that sound to button 1. So I'm going to click assign on my keyboard on my phone. I'm going to click this button up here on my phone. And now on my phone, it no longer says beep or whatever it was at 1. It now says the price is right ding, that last sound we heard. Now that it's no longer assigning a sound, this now says play next sound. If I click this button, I get the assigned sound. Down here it says beep. The name of the sound I moved from here down to here is there. So now if I wanted to move that beep sound, I could click assign sound, but somewhere else it moved the beep sound. If I click play next sound on my phone, there's Old Spice, Sad Trombone, Lightsaber, and now my next sound should be the beep sound that I pulled out of the button and moved into the unassigned sounds. Oh, wait, not pop. Here. There it is. There's the beep. I had 5 sounds in there. I thought I only had 4, but yeah, let's look at that list. Yeah, it's got 5 sounds. So now my sound that used to be the Price is Right ding in this list, if I go through them, so there's Old Spice, there's Sad Trombone, there's Lightsaber, there's Pop, and now instead of the Price is Right, because I'm running this app and it's moved beep out of this list for button 1 and moved it into this list where the Price is Right is, I get beep here. So it swapped those. Now that doesn't show up here in this code here. It's happening inside of my phone that it swapped them around. When I restart the app, it'll go back to the way it was to begin with. But while I'm running the app, I can assign that sound to where Homer screams. And now when I click that button, it plays that. And if I go through my list, Homer screams has now replaced the beep. So it swaps them around. Everything's working fine. That's a very long video and enough for today. Thank you.